This video is sponsored by Artlist.
Without me, you're nothing.
In a world full of dreams, where the moonlight softly beams, there's a place where wonders gleam, and nothing lets it seem.
With the reignition of the franchise in Mission: Impossible – Ghost Protocol, it wouldn't take long after the December premiere of the film in 2011 for Paramount and Cruise to start work on the next installment. In keeping with the franchise's dynamic of always having a new director with each film, Brad Bird ruled out a return to the franchise, saying in an interview that, "I think that one of the things that's fun about the series is that they always pull in a different director and try to get a different kind of take on the premise. I'd probably be open to looking at it, but I think that part of one of the successes of the franchise is that they're always reassessing it with a new director."
It's the biggest Mission Impossible film, I think, in terms of scale. We had a tight schedule, so we were always on the move. I had a chair, but I never sat in it. So, I look forward to sitting down soon.
Although, interestingly enough, this will be the final film to uphold that dynamic. With Bird out as the director, they would turn to a familiar face that helped in the rewrites of Mission: Impossible 4, Christopher McQuarrie.
The earliest conversation I had about Rogue Nation was with Tom when we were making Edge of Tomorrow. We were working on the script for that movie one night, and we'd had a very long discussion about story. And Tom said, you should direct the next Mission Impossible.
McQuarrie had provided important script revisions for the MI4 script, leaving him well placed to work with the formula. And he also had a long-standing relationship with Cruise, having first met back in the mid-2000s for, as they called it, a professional curiosity, bonding over discussions about movies, and then working together for 2008's Valkyrie, a World War II film Cruise made while Mission Impossible was on hiatus, with him as the star and producer and McQuarrie as a co-writer. They later would team up for 2012's Jack Reacher, with McQuarrie directing this time. Their relationship is a fascinating turning point in this franchise, as Tom Cruise seemed to have some kind of issue with most of the directors or writers during the franchise, but McQuarrie seemed to have a keen understanding of how the actor operated, and Tom Cruise had seemed comfortable enough with McQuarrie through the back half of his career.
Chris and I have the same sensibility in storytelling and the same love of films and the same kind of movies. And really right from the beginning, when he came on, he wrote and produced Valkyrie.
And what rash action did you have in mind, Colonel?
That would be a decision for the Supreme Military Commander.
And of course, I admired his work before that. He won the Oscar for Usual Suspects, and someone who I just think has a very strong and unique voice. In the nicest possible way, we push each other. And I invite that from the people, I work with. And he does also, to say, bring me ideas. Don't, I want to hear how you feel about this.
McQuarrie would be confirmed as the director in August 2013, and with him in place, Paramount set the release date for Christmas Day 2015, with production set to begin in a year's time, August 2014, firing the starting gun on the pre-production race of getting the script and all of the pre-production work complete on time.
Chris is also brilliant at is writing for the actor. So with each person that's coming in, we're going to look at it and adjust the character to them.
Initially, scriptwriter Drew Pearce was brought on to write, but he would later be replaced by Will Staples. Staples had actually started out as a writer for video games, including Need for Speed, Rivals, and Call of Duty: Modern Warfare 3, but was transitioning into screenwriting. The opening sequence was originally going to cover the original IMF team from back in the 60s, but that plan was scrapped. New to the film this time, Rebecca Ferguson was cast as the lead character.
As we were working with her, I kept telling her, I said, look, you're really talented. Her hand-eye coordination, the way she moves is very powerful and elegant. And so I feel then I know Chris feels the same way. We feel fortunate that we found her.
Who became a staple of the films until the 7th film, replacing a planned return of Dan Briggs from the original trilogy.
I think that Rebecca Ferguson actually gets to play a role that's worthy of her. She's not being used as sort of eye candy or the damsel in distress or the prize. She's an incredibly strong character.
While Alec Baldwin joined the cast in August 2014 as the CIA director, Alan Hunley. Now, out of all the Mission Impossible films and productions, this film probably had the easiest and smoothest pre-production process out of all of them. And as that, we're already headed into production.
We're constantly rewriting and working. You don't know what's going to happen next.
Operative 207. Your mission is nearing the final stages as Oil Baron Salvo Korlowski. While we prepare for the last stages of that mission, we need to ensure that your other cover remains intact. The subpar YouTuber named Frame Voyager, known enough to get attention when needed, but not large enough to cause a commotion. We have prepared some talking points for you today as Frame Voyager and his sponsor Artlist.
Yes, I see. According to the background files, this is the site he uses assets from for all of his videos?
That is correct. So go ahead and remove the mask, and we will record.
Hey guys, Frame Voyager here. And I just want to talk to you about Artlist. As any good editor knows, you need as many assets in your disposal as possible, from high-quality music, sound effects, stock footage, and more. One tool that I use for every video is their Artlist Library Extension plugin that fits right into Premiere Pro, as well as a bunch of other really cool effects they add right into Premiere Pro or your NLE of choice, allowing me to search, preview, and literally drag and drop assets right into my timeline. One of the things I look for is features that will save me time on every edit, and the Artlist Library Extension really does that for me. On this channel, you can go all the way back to the very first video, and we're using Artlist music. I can't recommend them enough for anyone looking for a great asset that you can go to for any type of video project. So if you're looking for that today, click on the link in the description or pinned comment below and get 2 months free on any annual plan.
That's perfect, Operative 207. Your alternative cover is complete. Now back to the final stages of our mission.
All right, let's get back to the mission. Principal photography would begin in August 2014, starting in Vienna, Austria. The production would make its way through Morocco and London as well. McQuarrie would bring back cinematographer Robert Elwood from Rogue Nation to DP this edition. We'd worked together indirectly on the last movie. I guess they just decided it would be nice if I would shoot this movie.
He comes from that school of Conrad Hall, Owen Roisman, that kind of classic storytelling, but has enormous range also. I mean, here's a guy who can shoot something like the Opera House and yet bring wonderful drama to intimate moments like the Safe House, and to have that kind of range. I think he's a great collaborator.
He has an incredibly incisive eye in terms of how to cover a scene in the simplest way imaginable. He would watch Tom and I work together. He would watch the two of us discuss story or craft a scene. And then he would step in at a key moment and ask a specific question that would upend everything that we had been working on.
An interesting point in Rogue Nation's production is that it was shot predominantly on film. The reason for film was a less practical one, but it rather came out of preference. Tom Cruise just didn't really care about digital formats at the time and didn't look at digital as a meaningful upgrade over film. And we talk about this here because digital cameras around this time really started to become predominantly used within film. And although they would use film for this specific Mission Impossible movie, there were certain underwater segments that they would use digital cameras for. He won't do it until they run out of film or nobody else can process it anymore. He's a traditionalist, and he doesn't think digital capture is an improvement beyond workflow. It's not an image quality improvement from his point of view. Most of the movie was shot on the Panavision Millennium XL2, the Arri 235 and 435 together with modified Panavision C-series lenses. A big concern was shooting a neutral image across the board, which would be easy to color, match, and post, using no filters other than NDs, relying on digital color correction in post, of course. But beyond just selection of film for this movie, the director also wanted the film to have dynamic movement. As far as camera movement, Christopher really wanted a lot of movement and energy. Lots of Steadicam, lots of handheld. He wanted to emphasize camera movement, but have it grow out of whatever the staging and blocking was, to add another level of energy. There aren't many moments where people are standing still. Now, where the digital Area 65 came in was during a very tough underwater shoot, a sequence during which Ethan Hunt was supposed to hold his breath and traverse an underwater complex to further his mission. From the beginning, the scene was envisioned to make heavy use of digital and visual effects, as it would otherwise be too dangerous, and also straight up impossible to achieve the stunt in camera.
Most of the work that's done in the film is done in camera and is practical, but there was literally no way for us to shoot that sequence in a real environment.
This is where Rogue Nation's team came to an interesting solution. Together with clever compositional techniques, camera movements, and a green-walled pool for the action to reside in, the crew was able to collect their plates, which were able to be composited later on. With Tom Cruise needing to hold his breath and exert himself underwater for real in this scene, the danger of potentially running out of oxygen became, of course, central to the stunt. They would further enhance that point by adding an oxygen meter to Ethan's suit that the audience would track throughout the progression of the scene.
I've done a lot of underwater work, and Chris and I were on Edge of Tomorrow. We were shooting the underwater sequence, and already at that time, Chris and I were talking about mission. And I said, I've never done an extended underwater sequence. How can we make a really long sequence for an audience and have them experience what it's like holding your breath for that period of time?
There were a lot of elements to this stunt. First, Tom Cruise's character loses the ledger he was supposed to replace the old one with. The reactor gets reactivated, starting to powerfully swirl once again, and Ethan has to grab the correct card once again and drag himself back to the access point to put the correct card in, all while we hear his heartbeat straining more and more. How does one go about creating such an insane scene? Well, as they always say, safety first.
Basically, what I'm doing is taking Tom and Rebecca through a breath hold special operations program. It's a program that I've designed for militaries. And what we're really trying to do is we're developing their ability to hold their breath under extreme conditions.
And through this process, Tom Cruise would play an influential role in convincing the team that the shoot was not just going to be possible to pull off, but even safe to do.
Normally, in underwater sequences, people hold their breath for 10 seconds, 15 seconds max. So I had to prove to everyone that it was actually safe and spend time with the safety guys and the safety officers to show them, look, not only is it safe, it's better that I know how to hold my breath because I'm going to be very relaxed.
Although Tom Cruise would convince the production team that this was a stunt that they could accomplish, the team needed to tackle the considerable challenges of filming a green screen sequence underwater. The lighting would predominantly come from LED tubes set up below. Nobody is supposed to go down there, so creatively, why would there be lighting down there? We had to come up with some sort of ambient light that appeared to come from the electronics down there.
Underwater photography is extraordinarily difficult and time-consuming. It's dangerous, it's slow, it's very exhausting.
You move differently. You act differently.
We also ended up using prototype underwater LED tubes, designed and supplied by Ricky Miller from Aerable, which we sped along the axis of movement. The sets were also relatively simple, as most of the environment was going to be replaced with computer-generated imagery. However, there needed to be something Cruise could hold on to, and which could double as an anchor for the CG imagery, such as the vault floor being physically embedded into the ground, or the exit vents lever that Tom holds onto and manipulates. There were also higher detail props placed into the water, such as the piece of wall for the ledger vault and a green screen behind it to digitally extend afterwards. As to how the camera was operated, there were some logistical challenges. In the behind the scenes, we can see cameras mounted to a crane that would dip into the water, while other scenes the camera would be operated underwater and would run across a circular track. You can also see here that with some of the rig-free work they were doing underwater with the cameras, that they would use air filled with water bottles to keep the camera cables from floating into the shot. When Rebecca Ferguson dipped into the pool herself, many of her performances were assisted by wire work and interesting crane arms, which would help guide her movements under the water.
And for some reason, I actually don't question it, I just do it. When Tom does something, I can do it. That's my motivation.
While for a movie like Avatar 2, where the actors were underwater for much longer stretches of time and also had mocap suits that would be translated in visual effects and CGI later on, for this Mission Impossible film, there was a lot more of a strain on the post-production team, which had to painstakingly remove the rigs in the acquired plates for this scene, even though many would label the underwater heist as their favorite part of the movie. For Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie, the scene was a bit of a disappointment. Although why it was a disappointment disappointment? We don't exactly know yet, but this knowledge they collected in Rogue Nation may have come useful for Dead Reckoning Part 2, however, for which the director and crews attest that they will apply much of the learned knowledge from this specific stunt for underwater shenanigans in their upcoming film. And we'll cover that in the production of Mission Impossible 8, which stick around for. For all of you that have watched Rogue Nation, however, one scene really is more insane than the rest. Funny enough, not much can be said about Tom Cruise hanging off the plane. He just really did it with minimal safety equipment, ensuring that he didn't get blown off if he let go.
There was an incredibly precise margin of error in the throttle. The plane had to be going fast enough to stay airborne, but it couldn't be going so fast that Tom simply would be torn off regardless of what safety measures we had.
And one wire that leads into the direction of where the camera was mounted, and a strap that was attached to the plane's side door. Several modifications were made to the fuselage too, such as a mount that would hold the attached camera in place. Those modifications needed to be pitched first, however, as anxiety and doubts were in the air on whether or not a stunt like this was even possible.
Airbus did not know for certain that the plane could structurally deal with what we were considering.
We basically looked at you like you were crazy, to be honest. So we had to convince them. So from my side, it was a lot of drawings and engineering and a lot of talks and letting them trust me.
The danger doesn't lie in potentially falling off, however. There were a litany of potential dangers that could happen any time. A bird can impact Tom, which can lead to serious injury.
As he came in, he hit an owl. He hit it so hard, you can actually see the feathers.
We simply could not control the variable of birds flying in the path of that airplane. And if a bird hit Tom at that speed on any part of his body, that would have been the end.
A piece of debris could get flung into Tom's direction.
Any particle that could hit me, even a small little rock.
If it was sucked into the propeller and hit Tom, it would be traveling at the speed of a bullet.
And to top it all off, the jet exhausts are toxic and could poison Cruise due to his proximity to the engines. If Tom Cruise wasn't simultaneously the producer and star for Mission Impossible, the crew likely would have used a stunt double for this scene, especially when considering what the precautions were for committing to the stunt. How about contact lenses, which protect your eyes from the debris, but effectively blind you at the same time? Or how about no protection from the winds under your costume, so you have to endure the chilling winds with minimal protection? For Tom Cruise, that was no problem though. In fact, he may have had fun with this stunt.
I just said to the camera, I went like this, and I said, let's go again, I'm ready.
As he made the crew repeat the takeoff flight 8 times. Now, surprisingly, this stunt was used very widely in all the marketing materials, and because of that, McQuarrie knew he would need to use this stunt early on in the film instead of for a climactic ending. We knew instinctively that it was the right thing to do to put these scenes where we did, said McQuarrie. If we built the whole movie about that shot and put it at the end, it simply wouldn't be fresh or satisfying. Production would pause on February 20th, 2015, reportedly because McQuarrie was still trying to figure out the ending to the film. One anonymous source reported that Chris, Tom, and a third person wanted to take a minute to get from what they thought was a good place to a more perfect place. Whatever the case may be for this odd halting of the production, it would get underway once again and finally wrap up on March 12th, 2015. Despite the additional production time, Paramount would move up the film from a Christmas release in 2025 to a July 2025 release date, likely to avoid the big return of Star Wars: The Force Awakens releasing that Christmas. Rogue Nation was initially projected to be the highest grossing Mission Impossible film, but would fall short of that goal, becoming the second highest grossing installment behind Ghost Protocol, with a worldwide total of $682.7 million. It would also receive high marks with audiences and critics. Plenty of positives for this film to already begin the conversation of what's next, the franchise. And you can hear about the story of that production of Mission Impossible 6 Fallout right here.